Hello and welcome to another episode of NNC World News. Today we are reviewing the history, expansion, and social changes of Japan. Japan is a collection of over 3,000 islands, but there are four main ones. Since Japan is 4/5 mountains, they heavily rely on harvesting rice and fish to keep their population of 125 million people in the labor force. Rice and fish used to be a larger part of their economy, but in today's time they have industrialized and become a very modern nation. Our field reporter Micaiah Johnson flew out to the Great Islands of Japan early this morning to report the history of the Japanese feudalism. How's the weather over there, Micaiah?
The weather over here is a little hot for my liking. Japan during the spring and summer can become very hot. Today, I am going to share a little bit about Japanese feudalism. Japanese feudalism begins in the 1100s and ends in the 1600s and was a warring society. Feudalism has four key players: an emperor, a shogun, a samurai, and commoners. Commoners are like the peasants and the artisans and the merchants. The majority of the Japanese population falls under the commoners. The commoners work for the samurai. Most of the earnings made by the commoners is passed up to the samurai. Not only does the samurai take the commoners' earnings, but they also have the capability to use them as a military. The shogun and the emperor have a balance of powers and are more so on top of the concept of feudalism. They are the players in charge, meaning they're the big Top Gun people. All of the earnings from the samurai is passed up to them. Now, over to you, Pageland, where you will learn more about the Japanese expansion.
Starting in the 1600s, Japan undergoes a Tokugawa society which centralizes feudalism. During the centralized feudalism, samurai and their families were forced to stay in Edo, while the samurai spent every other year in the city. This increased trade and made things much more peaceful between the samurai. In 1639, Japan practiced isolationism, which centralized feudalism, increased trade, and made Japan more peaceful. In 1853, Matthew Perry arrived in Japan and has an impressive story to tell.
We're here in front of our live studio audience in San Francisco, and I'm here with the Matthew Perry to tell us a little bit more about his journey that began on July 8, 1853.
I began my journey in hopes that Japan would open its ports to American vessels. Eventually, the Japanese signed the Treaty of Kanagawa, which opened two ports for the provisioning of ships, but not for trade, and provided for exchange for diplomats.
Did you give the Japanese anything in return?
Yes, one of my gifts was a quarter-scale model train.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for your time as well. Now back to Micaiah in Japan.
After the arrival of Matthew Perry, the Japanese wanted to honor the emperor and expel the barbarians. In 1868, they imposed the Meiji rule, which restored power to the emperor, and the main goal of this rule was to modernize and expel barbarians. Barbarians are being referred to as the Western influences in this case. Eventually, Japan puts an end to unequal treaties and seeks to increase their political standing. The Russo-Japanese War was a turning point for the country because it was the first time an Asian country defeated a European country. Now, over to Paige to take you through World War II and
During the 1920s, the people of Japan wanted peace over military. However, in the midst of a depression, military dictatorship began and Japan took over Burma, Hong Kong, and the Philippines while bombing Pearl Harbor in 1941 and started the Second World War.
This just in, another breaking news report. The United States has just dropped a bomb on Hiroshima. Devastating damage has already taken place, but radiation sickness may be the biggest of their concerns. Paige and Micaiah just happen to be in the area, and they will fill us in on the severe damage that has already begun.
Here I am in this devastating place called Hiroshima. An awful and tragic thing just happened. If you come this way, you can see that a dog is by its owner, and he can't help anything because dead. She's dead, and she's barely alive, and she must be. But if you keep coming over here, you can see that this is a vaporized body. Vaporized. The young little children, they couldn't do anything because of this massive cloud of bad stuff. woman. And she just can't help herself. She nearly is black from all of the disgusting, polluted radioactivity. And if you just keep coming this way, oh my gosh, is that a real person?
This is it. I just hopped on a flight and I'm here in Hiroshima, and this is just the most devastating thing I've ever seen. As you see here, these chairs are burnt to ash, and here, over here, a young child, merely 12 years old. Oh, no. Oh, it's still alive. Mom. She's looking for her mom. Oh, sweet, sweet. Oh. She's breathing. These children have been taken from their parents. It's just so sad. And that will, I'm going to try to save this child's life. This will conclude our episode on the Japanese history of